Hello, hello. I see people come on in. Oh, look at all the people. Sorry I'm late. I just got off another call. I appreciate your patience. I'll wait, give it another minute so everybody gets connected here now that I've started the meeting. My name's Kara Boeldt. If you haven't met me yet, I'm the Chief Experience Officer for our new Keller Williams One Chicago. In fact, let me change my name here so that you can see it. And I've been with Keller Williams. This is my 14th year. So I've been in the business for a little while. And one of the things I like most about being in real estate is contracts and negotiations. I would like to ask you guys, if you're appropriately clothed, to please turn on your cameras, because it's really difficult to teach to a black screen. So if you're able, I appreciate it. Thanks, Alex, Megan. Perfect. Miguel. All right. So this class is interactive, and so I hope that you either chat or, you know, unmute yourself and pipe in when you have questions and when answers. Who has written a listing contract before? Yes, no, maybe. Anyone written a contract before? No? Nope. All right, Dell, Danielle, Kristen. Kristen, have you written a listing agreement before? I feel like you have.
No, my first listing might be coming up tomorrow, Thursday.
Awesome, very good. Val, hi Val. Hi. Jim, no problem. Jim, are you oh, you're Dell on there. Okay, just so I don't call you Dell, I'll call you Jim. Val, thanks for joining in. We got a few more joining us here. Val, you've done a few listing agreements in your life.
As a transaction coordinator, I have. I just kind of wanted to do a review and see if I'm up on speed with everything.
Awesome, very good. Who here is a member of an association other than the Chicago Association of Realtors? Is anyone with NASBAR, Main Street?
I'm in Main Street.
You're with Main Street, okay, great. Anybody else with somebody other than CAR? Who's with CAR? Raise your hand, shake your head. Okay, so we are gonna go over as much as we can today, but we're gonna touch on the Chicago Association of Realtors listing agreement, the city version, and then also the multi-board. Are you guys familiar with either of those? Then we'll touch on the exclusive rental agreement also if we have time. Again, Kara Boeldt, been with Keller Williams for 14 years. Your contract, especially your listing contract, is what gives you the authority to what? What does it give you authority to do?
List the property.
List the property. List and market the property and earn a commission, which is what we're sort of all here to do, right? Earning commissions is the name of the game. All right, I'm gonna open up a PowerPoint here if I can get my technology to work for me. All right, on. We have too many tabs open at the moment. excited about contracts? Who's freaked out about contracts? All right. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm sort of blind sharing here. It's not wanting me to share my screen. Okay, we'll try this again. There we go. All right. Can you guys see my calendar here? How about now? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. So again, today we're going to talk about the Chicago contract, the multi-board 7.0, and the exclusive rental listing if we have time for that. So for those of you who do business primarily in the city of Chicago, you will probably often use the Chicago contract. When you're doing a rental, you can use the Chicago listing agreement, or you can use the exclusive rental agreement. Either way is fine. Do's and don'ts of contracts. Read the contract, start to finish. It's super boring, but it actually guides you on pretty much everything that you're going to do within within real estate. Any question you have about your deal is you're going to go back to your contract. What does the listing contract say? What does the offer to purchase say? Those contracts are what guide your business, what guide how you what's the next step you're going to take. So make sure you read the contract. You're going to read it 1,000 times, but start learning and understanding what each of the clauses say and what they mean. And if you don't know what they mean, it's okay to ask questions, because it's a lot of information. Most of it they don't teach you in real estate school, and but it's really important for you to know this. Also on the do list, fill in the blanks. You want to fill in the blanks that you need to fill in, because it determines how you're protecting your buyer clients or your seller clients. This is kind of all contracts. Make sure you fill in the blanks. With a listing agreement, filling in those blanks, adding that information actually helps protect you. If I see a lot of contracts come through where the little check boxes for like refrigerator and furnace and other fixtures and things like that are not checked. Nobody's taking the time to fill in those little boxes, but that actually protects you. So if your seller does not say, light fixtures included on that listing agreement, and you sell that property, you get to closing, the buyer walks through the final walkthrough and sees that the dining room chandelier is missing. Guess who's buying a new dining room chandelier? You might be, because if the seller didn't give you authority to sell that by checking that box, and you sold it anyway and didn't disclose it, you might be on the hook for buying that new chandelier. So you want to understand that the listing agreement actually helps protect you as you're marketing properties for sale. It also helps you get paid. Use the most recent contract. So the associations, all of them are kind of constantly updating their forms and their contracts. You want to make sure you're using the most recent. If you're in the Lincoln Park location and soon to be in the One Chicago DocuSign account, we will be keeping templated documents, the most recent, available for your use so that you don't have to go figure out, well, here's a 2018 listing, but is there a 2019 or is there a 2020? We're going to have the most updated contracts for you to use, templated in DocuSign, so you don't have to go look for those. Use the appropriate writers or addendums. So oftentimes we'll get a, and this is more specifically in regards to like the buy side, but you might write an offer to purchase, and then the deal falls apart. You have to cancel and sign a mutual release form. If you did a 7.0 purchase contract, you want to make sure that you're using the correct addendum, the 7.0 cancellation, rather than the Chicago cancellation. So make sure you're using the appropriate writers for the contracts that you've written or the contracts you've received. Things not to do: do not line through text. You do learn this in real estate school. Do not line through the basic text of your contracts. We see this a lot. Most of the time, if a client does not like a certain sentence or paragraph, there's often a blank in there that you can fill in with NA or $0 or 0%. You do not have to cross through an entire line or paragraph of information. That wording that in those paragraphs sometimes protect you also. So you don't want to just go line through paragraphs. It's also IBFPR, one of their hot topics when they audit a brokerage. If they see lined through contracts, they're going to be digging really deep into that business. Now, the brokerage might get in trouble, but you as the agent who did that may get penalized for practicing law. So the only time you can line through text is if you're specifically instructed in writing by your seller. Sometimes you'll get an attorney client that wants to line through things. That's okay. Just make sure you get in writing that the seller has asked you to do that. And ideally, you don't line through anything. Adding text outside of the blanks. So we will see sometimes entire clauses and paragraphs added to a contract. Again, that's potentially considered practicing law. We as realtors are only really allowed to fill in the blanks of the standard forms and contracts that we've been issued. And to add much outside of that is a red flag for IBFPR. A lot of things that might be additional, and you'll see this more often on the buy side than the list side, you can have the real estate attorney who's going to help close that deal can write something up, or the brokerage might be able to help you. So always reach out if you have a question and or a client asks you to add additional information. And finally, do not practice law. Just remember, to stay in the lines of what you're doing, marketing property for sale, negotiating, and getting to closing. Most other things can be handled either by an addendum that the brokerage helps you prepare, or by one of the attorneys in the transaction. So leave that to them. Any questions so far on any of that? No? All right. Let's see what my next one hit is. The purpose of the listing contract, we kind of covered this a little bit before. Marketing, giving you the legal right to market and sell a property. Conveyance, those checkbox items that you'll see in the listing contract. Your compensation, which is really important to make sure you have that in writing. And to gather the information you need from the seller in writing. Again, this goes to your liability when you're marketing a property for sale. If they tell you that the homeowner association fees are $300 a month, they've written that in the contract that they've signed, right? You go and market the property at whatever price for $300 a month HOA fees, and then you get into the due diligence stage and attorney review, and you find out, oh, in January, they actually raised the fees and now it's $375 a month, you're probably going to have one upset buyer. And sometimes it's enough of a difference that the buyer can't get the financing, right? If they're tight in on their mortgage financing, you're going to have a potential struggle. And what's going to happen is that they're going to ask you as the agent potentially to come up with the difference between, or your seller, between, you know, $300 a month and $375 a month for 12 to 24 months. Make sure if it's in writing, it's protected, right? You can only convey information that you've received from the seller. And if the seller has written this down and signed it, that mistake is now on them rather on you. Does that make sense? Use the listing contract as a time to set expectations with your sellers. I feel like I guess I didn't miss anything here. Where are the listing contracts found? So where do you guys find have you gone looking for listing contracts? Do you know where to find them currently? Where do you find them? Speak up. I can't see the chat right now with my screen share on.
On DocuSign or on the car website.
Cool. Val, where do you keep yours?
I have them, I get them off of Car, and then I have them in my own little file too.
Awesome.
So, and then, yeah, I do get, you can get them off of Command. I don't use them off of there.
Who is using DocuSign in this call, or will be using DocuSign if you're brand spanking new?
I do.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to walk you through 2 ways to find your contracts. DocuSign, you likely have them in there, whether they're templated or not, depending on where you currently office. It's debatable. We all do things a little bit differently currently. In the new organization here over the next couple of weeks, you will have templated documents within your DocuSign. So we'll look at those, but I'm going to go to the CAR website, Chicago Association of Realtors, first. Now, if you're a member of CAR, you have access to these. If you're a member of Main Street, you'll have to go to Main Street to get your documents, but it's going to be probably somewhat similar. So I've logged in here to, hopefully, let me see if I might have to re-log in. Nope, it's going to let me. So I've logged into Chicago Association of Realtors. Over here in Realtor Tools, you can scroll down to Forms and Contracts and click on that. And this is a nice little search button here. If you're looking for something specific, you can type in, like if I type in lead, it will pull up all the lead-based paint stuff I need to deal with. Today we're doing listings, listing agreements. We're going to the listing side over here. And I'm going to go down and we're going to pick up the exclusive listing agreement. This is the Chicago version. All right, can you guys see this or is it too small, the text? You're all good? Okay, it's a little bit small for me. I'm old though. Let's see. There we go. That might even be better, right? Is that good? Can you see that? All right. So if you use a form from CAR, you'll see that there are auto fields that you can just type in, which is really super convenient, especially if you are not as tech savvy with DocuSign. Or your documents aren't templated in DocuSign. This is a really great way to get started. So you've got your exclusive right to sell listing agreement. So here we go. Let's fill in some blanks. The exclusive right to sell listing agreement is entered into by and between, who's the sponsoring broker? Everyone but Val or Megan.
Keller Williams, Chicago Lincoln Park.
Yes, so you're going to be Keller Williams, Chicago Lincoln Park, Lakeview, O'Hare, depending on where you reside.
We still Chicago Lincoln Park? We're still Chicago Lincoln Park?
We are until we have our official onboarding. When you sign paperwork that says you're now with One Chicago, then this will all change and you'll write in Keller Williams 1 Chicago. But this sponsoring broker is sometimes confusing to people because they think, oh, it's my managing broker, or, you know, is it me? The sponsoring broker, really it should say sponsoring brokerage, but you're going to put the company that you're with. Again, in a couple of weeks, this will say Keller Williams 1 Chicago. For now, I'm going to put Lincoln Park. That type is really small. And the seller, so you're going to put the seller's names in here. You should at this point have already made sure that the sellers you're meeting are the sellers of record with Cook County or whatever county you're in. And we'll go look through some of those websites here after a bit towards the end of this class. If it is a husband, wife, or a married couple, but only one of the spouses is listed on the deed, you might still put both spouses, because in Illinois, spouses do have often do have some right to equitable title. So you just want to understand who really is the seller. I tell you this from experience. I was probably 10 years of experience, so zero reason that I didn't follow through, but I looked up the seller, and the seller had the name of the person who lived in the property and the name of the person who owned the property were the same, but one was a junior and one was a senior. And it didn't even occur to me to ask about the junior senior bit. I filled out an entire listing agreement. After I put it on the market, after we negotiated, I found out that actually the parent of the person who lived in it was the actual owner. And it all worked out fine because they knew that this was happening and they were going to sell the house and were 100% okay with it. But had I tried to list a property and sell it and got that far along and found out that the real owner wasn't aware that it was being sold or wasn't okay with it being sold, I would have had a whole lot of trouble. So there are things that, you know, even as an experienced agent, we sometimes miss, and this is why we have attorney review in the state, to help catch things like that. But make sure you understand who really the seller is and ensure that you know the person sitting in front of you signing is actually the seller. And you can ask to look at or for a copy of their like their driver's license or passport or some sort of picture identification. And we do this with buyers because we want their full name, legal name listed. You want to make sure you have their full legal names listed. So if it's Bob Smith and Sue Smith, you want both of those names in there. Term, this is the next most missed box. The term of the agreement, a lot of people will put the date that they sign the listing right here. So if you were going today to get a listing, people will often put September 8th, 2020, but this actually is the end of the term. So how far this contract is gonna go forward. You're gonna find lots of different opinions on how long a contract should be. Sometimes people do them for a week because, you know, it's a one-off deal. They might do them for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. That's between a negotiable point between you and your seller. So make sure that the term date here is the end date for the contract. Why is this saying low battery? Hold on, plug in here. All right, price, marketing price. As you'll see, as I noted before, there is an exclusive rental listing agreement, which we'll touch on if we have time. You can use that one, or you can use this exclusive right to sell. Either one works, and you can do both. So on the price here, especially for condos with parking, you'll see something like $375 plus $20,000 parking. So this is a perfectly acceptable location to add in that additional parking price if there is one. Now, making sure that parking is actually deeded and you're able to sell it is also important, and we'll talk about deed a little bit later and where you can find that information. You can also, sometimes a client will ask you to market their property for sale and for rent, or you know that, hey, it might be a hard time to sell this property, but we can probably rent it. And they say, hey, let's try selling it for 3 months. If we don't get anywhere, we want to rent it out. You can go ahead and discuss this price per month here for your rental price. So we'll say, you know, this is going to be $3,000 a month if we're going to rent it. Now, if they absolutely do not want to rent it and they're freaked out about that line, it's okay to put not applicable, 0, or whatever. This just allows you to not have to go back and fill out a whole new rental agreement if they decide to rent it out. This is pretty self-explanatory. The address of the property, you want to make sure you get the unit number in there if there's a unit number, city, state, zip. This is the part that kind of gets goofy sometimes. Parking space numbers and storage space numbers. Parking is a little bit easier, but what we'll find is that the building has numbered spaces to make sense to people as they drive in, but it's not actually the parking space that's listed on the deed. And so you'll want to check with the deed, and again, I'll show you where to find that shortly. But a lot of times they may not even know the parking space number. This might have to change later, and that's okay. But if they know that their space is, you know, space 16, cool. You can write in space 16. Storage space number is the one no one ever knows. No one ever knows their storage space number. And so we see a lot of TBD. TBD is okay when you're signing the listing agreement. Don't delay getting this signed if you don't have that information, but definitely go back and add it in and have your seller client's initial on the change, or you can have it added and updated at attorney review as well. Storage space number is a little bit harder, and I will walk you through where to find that. So is it deeded? Is it a deeded space? Is it a limited common element? Is it assigned? And obviously indoor and outdoor. So deeded means that they own it, they pay taxes on that space. Limited common element means they're paying some sort of HOA fee typically on it. They might have a tax bill, but they're not able to sell the space outright. They don't own it outright. The condo association owns it, and they have some use of it. Assigned is, again, the condo association owns it in some form or fashion, and they have assigned you a particular spot. So this is important to notice which one. If it's deeded, then they need to be selling it typically for money, whether that's included in with the parking or separate from parking. But I always ask, sometimes they'll be like, well, I don't know if it's deeded. Are you paying taxes on it? If they're paying tax bill on it, it's deeded. And a lot of times you'll need to go find the PIN number for it as well. Possession, I usually cover this and say, you know, you'll be required to hand over the keys at the time of closing. So when everybody signs on the paper, on the dotted line at the closing of the title company, you'll hand over keys. That means you need to be moved out and have that place clean the night before, right? You never want your sellers still packing up and moving out the day of, because your buyers need to do a final walkthrough. If they do a final walkthrough and they're still packing up, that closing is going to get delayed. So just set the expectation that they should be out and have the place room clean condition. That means no boxes, no junk, nothing in the cabinets, nothing on the floors. It doesn't have to be professionally cleaned. That's a nice touch, but you definitely, they want to be able to, you know, the new owners can walk in and not have to pull anything out of that property. I actually have had clients who are like, well, we'll close and then we'll be out 2 weeks later. Well, okay, but that's something you have to work out up front and have post-closing occupancy. which your attorneys are not really going to like to do. It can be done, but I just set the expectation up front that whatever day we're closing, you need to be out the night before. Designated agent. This is where you get to be the superstar and have your name. You are the designated agent. Now, if you're on a team, it might be 2 people here, right? So Kevin Hinton and Emily Fair are rainmakers on one of our teams, Fair Hinton Group. And so their contracts almost always say Kevin Hinton and Emily Fair. And that way both brokers can have the same duties, responsibilities, loyalties to this client, and can handle any part of this marketing or selling of this contract of this property. So this is where your name goes. If you're a solo agent, you put your name there. If you're on a team and you're not sure, you need to ask your rainmaker, the leader of your team, who should be on the designated agent line. All right. Minimum services, the minimum number of things, the minimum stuff that you need to do to, to meet all of the requirements of the Illinois Real Estate License Act. This is to reduce the minimum service companies that you pay a flat fee and they put you on the MLS, but they don't do anything else. This is to help eliminate that. Seller obligations. So you're going to ask from your seller a number of things. You need them to cooperate with you and with the brokerage, sign paperwork, allow showings, refer any inquiries. A lot of times you'll see a seller gets a knock on the door. Hey, I see the sign in your yard. Can we just work a deal, or can I come in? And I always tell sellers, don't let strangers in your house, number one, but you need to refer all of them to me so that you don't lose any of your negotiating power by having a conversation with a potential buyer. Allow access and entry to the property at convenient times by the sponsoring broker or the designated agent. Now, this is a point where you need to set an expectation with your sellers. What does convenient times mean? For some people, it's like the 3rd Sunday of every month from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Well, that's not going to work, right? You need to explain to them what kind of access you think is going to be necessary. I typically will line them up and say, hey, we're going to list on Wednesday. I'm going to hold showings until Saturday. I'm going to do an open house on Sunday, and we're going to try to get this puppy sold by Monday or Tuesday to limit the number of people walking through your house at certain times. Now that is only in a perfect world that happens, right? So oftentimes we have properties on the market for 30, 60, 90, 120 days. So you need to set up the realistic expectations for when they need to allow buyers through. If they have kids, little babies that have bedtimes and things like that, you can set up showing time to block out certain hours, right? If their kids need to be in bed by 7 o'clock, in the broker comments of the MLS, you're going to put no showings after 6 p.m., right? Because you want some buffer there, and you want, obviously people can't be dragging their kids out of bed every night after 7 o'clock, but if you set that up initially, you're going to have fewer questions. You can state things like 24 hours notice, 48 hours notice, but make sure you set that expectation with the seller of what, access at convenient times means to you and to them, and work out an arrangement that's going to work for both of you. If the property is leased or occupied by a tenant, you have to follow the RLTO, the landlord tenant ordinance if you're in the city of Chicago. Each other community has some version of tenant rights. You need to make sure you're following those. That's a whole nother class. And particularly in the time of COVID, there are some additional requirements. Right now, a tenant has to give consent. You can't just force a showing, even with appropriate notice, 48 hours notice. They have to still give consent, at least last I heard. All right. And then sometimes you will find that agents will charge an upfront fee for professional services. And this is where you would include that. Whether you charge an upfront fee or not is entirely your own personal business decision. We have a handful of people who do and a whole lot of people who do not, and that amount varies. So some people just want to ensure that the cost of doing professional photos and the cost of those first brochures and putting the sign in the yard is covered, whether this thing sells or not. This is entirely a negotiation between you and your seller. And I know there are some people who always put in a fee. It's a non-negotiable for them. So this is, again, entirely up to you and your seller. Compensation.
Quick question.
Yes.
Would this be for like you said, photos, you know, that, so basically like the marketing fee you see charged on the MLS all the time?
It could literally be for like your week's supply of lattes. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
You can give a reason for what that is or not, but typically agents are doing it to cover their basic expenses to put a listing on the market.
Okay.
If the seller decides, you know, to take it off or cancel the agreement early, they've at least gotten this upfront. Some people use it to cover their like transaction coordinator fee if they're hiring our Val or Tanae. All right, any questions so far? This is super exciting. Why are you guys all excited about this? Okay, good. This really is like what sets you apart from other brokers, knowing your contracts and having them completed and to the best. And the buyer contract is way more fun, but the listing, it's really awesome to have listings. That's where you make your most money. So compensation. Why is this showing me the page number? I don't really care. Broker a commission in the amount of X%. So this is where you're writing in 5% or 6% or 22% or whatever you can get them to pay you. You're putting that in here. Remember that there's no set commission rate, right? And we're all Keller Williams here. What I will say is that the industry expects buyer's agents to receive 2.5%. So don't make an agreement with a seller that's going to harm their ability to sell because buyer's agents aren't willing to show a property with a commission, a co-op compensation of less than 2.5%. I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just saying that, you know, if you're not paying the what is considered, I think, because again, we don't have standards, but there is some expectation of compensation by a broker's agent. And if you look on the MLS right now, the vast majority are saying 2.5% is their co-op compensation. If you're the one house offering 1.5%, let's be honest, buyer agents are going to be less likely to show your listing. So just be considerate of what you would want as a buyer's agent if you're representing the buy side when you're setting up this agreement, because this percentage is your commission and the co-op broker's compensation. So I have certainly taken listings at a very low percentage in the past, say 4% for whatever reason. There's a hardship, you know, they're underwater or whatever. But I always offer 2.5% on the buy side because I don't want that offer of compensation to harm the listing and not get it sold. So again, this amount is negotiable between you and your seller. I just sort of have a set rate that I charge for this, that, or the other. And I would encourage you guys to have tiered rates as well. If you have a high level service, higher price point, or I'm sorry, higher level service, higher commission rate, average commission rate, average services, and then a lower services, lower commission rate. The human psyche tells us to pick the one in between. We don't want to be the super fancy one, but we don't want to be the cheapest one. A lot of times they will pick the one in the middle because that just seems the most comfortable. So again, you get to set that. You get to set that percentage for your business, and it's also negotiable. If you're like, I'm 6% across the board, there's no way I'm taking less than that, you have the ability to do that. You'll just have to set that standard and hold to it with your sellers.
Kara, I have a quick question, please.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to charge 5% and then pay a 2.5% commission to the buyer's agent, do I put that in as 7.5%?
Yes, if you're gonna keep 5% and you're gonna give 2.5%, then you'd put it into 7.5%.
Is that how most people do it then?
I mean, you're gonna mostly see 5% to 6%. So on 5%, you'd keep 2.5%, they'd keep 2.5%. The buyer agent would keep 2.5%. At 6%, they keep 2.5%, you keep 3.5%.
Oh, so normally at 5%, that includes both. Okay.
Yes, the vast majority of the time you're going to see listings at between 5% and 6%. There are certainly ones that are above and below both of those, but whatever this amount you put in here, you're keeping part of it, you're giving part of it away.
Okay.
So it should be in total the amount that you're keeping and what you're expecting to keep. Val, are you typing on my, how are you even doing that? Okay. That was a great question, Kristen, by the way, very great question. You can also add in additional commission here. So here's the difference. This up here, this is an amount that you're asking from the seller, should you choose to, in advance of this, just in signing this contract. So when you walk away from that listing appointment, they've signed this contract. If you put 500 in here, you're taking a check for 500 from them while you're there. The additional compensation down here is at closing. So you would not get paid this unless you're actually closing the deal.
Quick question. Who would that check be made out to if you're taking like a check for marketing fees or something like that? Do they just make it out to you or your company, or is it made out to the brokerage?
Great question. It is made out to the brokerage.
Okay.
Yep. So here again, some people you'll see, occasionally we'll see, 4%, like a lower amount here in the total percentage, but you'll see maybe $1,000 in here, and it might be because you've got a $1.5 million listing, so that percentage is huge on a $1.5 million listing. So you're going to take a less percentage because, let's be honest, you're not doing that much more work, but you want to ensure that you have the most high level marketing. So, well, actually, I'd probably put that up here to tell you the truth. But we will occasionally see where they've given like a lower percentage, but they've added an additional fee down here. So you might take a fee here for marketing, and you might take a transaction management fee here or marketing fee here. Again, up to you. You get to decide how to run your business and what money makes sense for you and what you're offering. This here is for a rental commission. Typically, you're going to see for a rental commission on a listing somewhere around 1 month's rent. So you'd keep half, you'd give half to the listing, to the buyer's, the tenant's broker. Again, that's just sort of an average, what we see a lot. It could be whatever you and the seller decide here, or it could be a flat fee if you want to put a flat dollar fee in here. Any questions on that so far? All right, this section here, line 57, is in the event that this agreement is canceled by seller pursuant to the terms of this agreement. So this is basically an early cancellation. Now, in my business practice, I do not charge an upfront fee, and I do not charge typically an additional rental commission, but I do charge an early cancellation fee. And that's going to be somewhere for me between $500 and $750. And what this is a cold feet fee. So someone's super excited, they're going to sign a listing contract. They can't wait to get the house listed. And then they go, no, I'm not sure. Maybe I shouldn't move. Maybe I should stay. And I mean, I've had people cancel like the next day. I'm sure somewhere along there it's my fault for not talking through motivation enough. But I just started putting in a cancellation fee. It makes people think while you're sitting in front of them, either on Zoom or in person, hey, and it's also a way to say, if you're not happy with my services, you can cancel, right? But I charge a $500 early cancellation fee, unless you're just unsatisfied with my service, in which case you can call my managing broker. They'll be happy to cancel this contract for you at any time if you're unsatisfied. You can have that conversation. We're going to put this thing on the market next Wednesday, right? You can have this conversation with them. If you decide that you change your mind, there's a $500 early cancellation fee. And for some people, they're more than happy to pay that. But what it does is, if I've spent money on photos and all of that, I'm getting it back at the time of cancellation. Dual representation. This is the one that's missed the most. So the other ones, we get incorrect information, but the dual representation is the one that we get missed the most. Make sure your sellers are initialing at the bottom of every page. If there's more than one seller, you need both sets of initials. Who understands what dual representation means? Hey, JP, I didn't even see you. Yes. Sorry, I can't see your name, and you raised your hand though. Speak up.
Sorry. Isn't that where you're representing the seller and the buyer in the same transaction?
Yes, which basically means that you're not representing anyone, because you can't guide them, lead them, or share really much information. You have to let them to come to an agreement on what they're offering, what they're counter offering, what they'll accept, what's the right way to go. Dual representation is a really tricky area. You almost become a neutral party. So you're helping the transaction come together, but you're not actually guiding anyone. I choose as my business practice to never do dual representation. I've never done a dual representation in my life because of the amount of liability and the inability to guide your seller client or your buyer client through the purchase. And I really feel like that is my value, is to be a consultant, to help them at every step of the way. I do not want to be a neutral party that says, whatever you think, right? Whatever you think is best. It is one of the fastest ways also to get sued, because if the deal falls apart, or it doesn't close, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing, but there's only one agent to point the finger at, right? So there are plenty of people who do dual agency. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. I just decided for my business, it was easier for me to, my commitment to my sellers was, I will represent you. You are paying me to represent you, to take you through this process with this huge investment of yours, right? I am going to, even if they're my buyers, and you'll come across this when you're busy enough, you have a buyer who's looking exactly for this listing, right? I'm going to hand my buyers off to an experienced buyer's agent, and I'm gonna pay them 25% referral fee. So I still keep 75% of that buy side. And Megan, would you be happy to just take a fully vetted buyer through the actual contract process to closing? Would you write an offer and take them to closing for 25%?
Of course.
I think most of us would. That's basically free money. I'll keep 75%, and maybe it's 50%, whatever it is, but I'm still going to make more money in the end. I'm going to have less liability, and we're going to get the deal done, and both parties are going to feel like they got a true representation by a realtor. So if you're going to do dual agency, you need, and even if you're not going to do dual agency, mine always are checked automatically for no, because
So one
yes
question,
is not an option. Yeah.
when you're having this conversation with your clients, do you typically explain to them like, I don't do dual agency, but if it comes up, I will, you know, refer that buyer to, you know, a very reputable buyer's agent to represent them to negotiate this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of options actually, but yes, I always say I don't as a business practice do dual agency because I feel like you're paying me a large amount of money to represent your interests. And if I become a dual agent, I become a neutral agent, and I don't want to do that. So in the event that I have a buyer that's unrepresented, right? So you could be at an open house, the neighbor walks in, doesn't have an agent, and says, we want to put in an offer. You can, one, do a dual agency, two, refer that buyer out to another agent who you trust, or three, you can disclose no agency to them, write up the paperwork, and still be the designated agent for your seller. So there's actually three options, but when you disclose no agency, you don't have any, you have to treat that consumer with honesty. You can't lie to them, right? But you don't have to represent them. You can still represent your seller. The best way is to refer them out to another agent, but I have had a situation where the buyer was like, I don't want another agent, and he just thought he was going to get a good deal by only having one agent in the process. And so since he refused to have another agent involved, I gave him a disclosure of no agency. I helped construct the offer per his wishes, and I presented it to my seller. And even doing that was like probably one of the worst deals I ever had in my life, where we didn't even know at the closing table if we were going to close. So it's, in my personal opinion, it's best to do to refer out and just have a buddy, someone that operates a lot like you, who you trust, to help you with these things, and then you can reciprocate when the time comes. And people are happy to take 25% off of a $500,000 deal that they didn't have yesterday. So for very little work. So all of my contracts, they're automatically checked no, because if you're going to sign your listing with me, I am not doing dual agency, and that's my rule. If you're choosing yes or no, you're willing to do a dual agency. And I'll tell you, like, there's probably 25% of agents who don't do dual agency and probably 75% who do dual agencies. There's not a wrong or right answer here, just what's best for your business. Your client needs to check yes or no if you're willing to do either one, and they need to sign. We can't force anyone to sign anything, frankly. If they're unwilling to sign this line, you need to check no. You can always bring up the option of dual agency at a later time, but if they're unwilling to sign this, I've never had somebody unwilling to sign it, but I guess there's always a time, then you would just automatically check no if they're not willing to sign it. Here is the good information that is, number one, not required. Number two, will keep you from having to buy refrigerators and chandeliers and stuff like that. You want to get the property PIN number. You probably have already found this doing your due diligence in prepping for the listing agreement. So that's usually not an issue. Real estate taxes for the year, you're going to look up the real estate taxes for the most current year and write those in. You have to be careful because Chicago, Cook County bills in 2 installments typically. And so you want to make sure you've got the full tax amount, not one installment worth listed. If there's more than one property PIN number, you're going to put that here. So that could be it's 2 lots that they have, but they're on different PINs. They haven't been consolidated. It's a PIN for a parking space. I've never seen a PIN for a storage unit, but I do know that there are some that exist. So if there's any other pins, this is great. If they have their latest tax bill on them, it's great for you to just double check the information. You can also look up homeowners exemption, senior citizens exemption, senior freeze exemption. So homeowners exemption, if it's a primary place of residence, they're probably getting a deduction if they filed for the homeowners exemption. And so that would potentially make a difference to a buyer if a buyer was buying the property for something other than their primary place of residence. Because if you're not a homeowner, a dwelling is your primary residence, your taxes are going to be a little bit higher. Senior citizens exemption, if you are over a certain age, you get an exemption, an additional exemption on your taxes to make that more affordable. If you're, and I think the age is 65, or maybe it's 70. And then the senior freeze is if you're over a certain age and you have an income under a certain level, they'll actually freeze how much taxes you're paying. So every year or every 3 years when they do increases in, let's be honest, they only increase our taxes. When they adjust our taxes for a senior freeze resident, those taxes remain the same. So this can be a pretty big deal. If you've got a 95-year-old woman who's selling her house, she's been on senior freeze for 20 years, and a cute couple buying their first home buys this property to fix it up and turn it into their first home. If they think the taxes are $1,000 because it's been frozen for 20 years, and this senior freeze exemption is not noted in the MLS listing, and this is something on the buyer side that you should check for as well, they're going to be mightily surprised after they close and those taxes are adjusted to the current rate. It could literally be the difference between them being able to buy the home and not. So make sure you check out that. Just checking on our time here. Sellers aware of any circumstances that would affect the transfer of title. And so they give you a list right here: probate, divorce, lis pendens, foreclosures, what that means, judgments, are they underwater or behind payment on their mortgage. This can be sometimes a touchy item to cover. I just go through it like it's 100% business, zero judgment, and I just walk into it full force. Are you aware of any circumstances that would affect the transfer of title, such as probate, divorce, foreclosure, judgments, or are you behind on your mortgage payments? You can find a lot, you can find lis pendens if they've actually filed the lis pendens. You can't necessarily see liens, but it's good to ask all of these things. It will come out in the title search, but it's good to know up front whether the property is currently leased or not. Utility and energy account numbers, not necessary, but it does help in the long run if a buyer is concerned about the cost to maintain a property. If you have those account numbers, you type them into the MLS and it pops up their average monthly use. So it's just a nice little touch. I think realtors who fill that out are going the extra mile to make this property more sellable. Lot size is approximate. You can find this on the county website as well. If it's a condo, this is typically left blank, or we write in common, the word common. I always ask for square feet here as well, which is harder to find on, condos. And it's also on single family homes, if there's been any additions or things like that, it can be off as well. And sometimes you can't tell if it's the basement included or not the basement included, but it's gonna be approximate, and you can get that from the seller. I always ask for a copy or a printout of their latest HOA statement if they're in a condo, because I'm telling you, everybody is on auto withdrawal for their HOA fees and they have no idea that they went up 2 months ago or a year ago or whatever. So I always ask for a copy of that. I almost had a deal fall apart. The HOA fee was $350 a month. That's how we advertised it. But when we actually got to closing, this is the same deal as the unrepresented buyer. The HOA fee was $300 plus $50 for cable, which was included and non-negotiable. So still this $350 that we'd advertised, but this person in particular was like super upset about the mandatory cable offering because he didn't even own a TV, and like the deal almost fell apart. Partly because of that, but partly because he didn't have an agent on his side telling him, you know, it's okay. This is common, this happens a lot. So I always get a printout so I'm 100% sure of what those HOA dues are and what they go to. Management contact, people never know who to contact, the property manager or the condominium homeowners association. Get this contact, you're gonna need to talk to them a couple of times during the transaction. Most people don't know their percentage of interest in the common elements. It's not that big of a deal, but you'll get it when you get the condo docs. Waiver of right of first refusal. I don't see this. I haven't, sometimes in co-ops do, but not so much in condo buildings. They might have it in there, but like if they would have, most condo associations don't have the money to buy condos to just have. So, but it'll say in your condo docs whether that's a requirement or not. Special assessments, this is important. Is there a special assessment? Has it been proposed? Are two different things. There might be one that's being talked about in the meeting minutes. That's going to come up. It's good to know that information and be prepared to have that conversation with any particular buyer or buyer's agents. But is there an actual proposed assessment? If so, then you need to figure out what that is, talk to the homeowners association to disclose that. And what's left. Sometimes there's a special, but there's only, you know, a certain amount left on that. Again, your sellers need to initial on the bottom of the page. Anyone have any questions so far? I know we're going quickly through this and we're not going to get through a whole lot more. We'll get through this document. I'm going to show you the deed, the recorder's office. Anyone have any questions so far? Hi, Ann Rosen. Gosh, people are popping on all over the place. Great. So in the disable discontinue website features, we see two buttons here. One is for reviews and comments regarding a property. So when you list your property, it goes up online everywhere, right? And some sites have the ability for the general public to comment or make a review about your property. So if your neighbor's really mad that you're leaving the neighborhood and selling your house, they could go on to a website that allows this and be like, the neighborhood's terrible, and you know, the neighbor next to this property is loud and has parties all the time, and whatever. Like they could, or they could be like, this house is terrible, it's falling apart and has rats in it. So a lot of people will disable the comments and the review parts of those websites. So it'll still pop up on the website, but there won't be the ability to review it or make comments. And then the second one is for automated estimate of market value of the property. I think we all know which website we're talking about, but there's more than one. If you do not want those websites saying that the house is worth 500 when you've got it listed for 650, you might want to choose and talk with your sellers about how it could potentially hurt the sale of the property, and consider disabling those. Again, that property will still go out to all of the websites. It just won't be, those estimated market values won't be visible. Any questions there? All right. Fixtures and personal property. This is where you don't want to buy a new dishwasher, so have them fill this out. A lot of times I will walk through the property with them and make note of these and pre-fill them, and then just ask them to pay special close attention to the fixtures and personal property. I also ask, do you have any antique fixtures that are attached to the walls that you're planning to take with? Anything that's attached to the ceiling or wall or floor that might look like a built-in or be, you know, a buyer would consider it belonging to the house that you're planning to take with you. Sometimes there's things like, I try never to have items excluded, because once they see it, they're going to want it, right? That antique chandelier that goes perfectly in that dining room, if you're not planning to include it in the sale, I usually say remove it from the property, put up whatever is going to be the new one so that there's no temptation even. But this is where you want to mark all of the things. If there's 2 washers and dryers, you can notate that here, 2. So mark what's appropriate. If there's more than 1, you can put it here. And then anything that's, so sometimes you'll be like, seller also transfers the pool table because it literally can't be removed from the basement. The house is built around it or whatever. You would include that here. That's still going to be negotiable on from the buyer side, but anything that might stay with the house, you can, swimming pools, pool tables. There's lots of things I can think of that you might put in there. Multiple listing service, MLS. We're required within 48 hours of signing this paperwork to have it in the MLS. So if you need more time than that to do pictures for the sellers to clean up, yada, yada, then you need to either fill in this date here. So your seller's authorizing you to keep it off the MLS until a certain date, or you need to add the MLS exemption form, which is an additional addendum that again allows you additional time before you have to put your properties up for sale on the MLS. There's also the private listing network form that can be included if you're planning to list this on a private network for a week or 2 while you're doing the photos before it goes out to the live market. So you either need to use this or you need to use the additional documents. If you're doing a private listing, then you need the private listing network contract and you need the MLS exemption contract. So 2 riders to this contract. And then if you do fill in a date here, make sure you have your seller's initial. I kind of tend to be lazy on that part. So if I know like my photographer is a week out, I'll just put it in here rather than the additional contract. Unless I know I want to put it up on the private listing network, then I'll add both. Seller signatures, both. If there's more than 1, if there's 3, just add in another signature line. The date in DocuSign will automatically populate, but it never hurts to add a date. Sponsoring broker signature. This is going to be your managing broker who signs here, not you. Not anybody else, not your rainmaker and your team. It's going to be your whoever's your designated managing broker for your office. Do your managing broker a favor, fill in all of this additional information. We will have templated forms in DocuSign. This is on the CAR website, so they're all blanks, but fill those in and just save your managing broker from having to fill all of those out. Here's where your information goes, designated agent. You want to ensure that your MLS ID, your contact information is on here. So this is a contract between you and the seller so that your seller officially knows how to get a hold of you. All of this seller information is helpful, can be helpful to you as you're, setting up their opportunities in command and things like that. It is not necessary for this contract, but it's always a great way to have everything in one place and to ensure that your sellers have given you permission to contact them through the means of communication that they prefer. And so that would be the benefit here.
Quick question, Kara.
Yes.
Can you scroll up a little bit where it says right there, where it says all legal title holders, is that the seller's names?
Yes, so that would be the seller's printed names. So
Okay,
if it's Bob Smith signs up here, and Sue Smith, yes. Sometimes legal agent would be like an attorney or a trustee for an estate or something, but yes. Again, have them initial at the bottom of the page. This is, this one in particular is all the provisions. You should read those when you're having a hard time falling asleep at night. That's the best time to read all of those, but you should read them. And then make sure they initial at the bottom here as well. All right. Again, this document protects you as a listing agent. It's how you get paid. It's how you're conveying property and have the legal authority to market and convey the property and what's in it. So, and this is, you know, your managing broker, they're focused on this. They're gonna kick it back to you if you don't have it filled out correctly or completely. But those are kind of the hot spots there. And then let's go to we've got a few minutes left here. You're gonna find in the executive, the exclusive rental listing agreement is going to be very similar, but it's just going to be rental specific. So you're not going to need the PIN numbers. You're not going to need a lot of the other information, the tax information and that sort of thing. So, okay, let's go to this is the Cook County Recorder of Deeds. So let me go back to the main page here. I think this is the main, here's the main page. So if you go to cookrecorder.com, this is where you can find information about the deed for the property you're looking to list. I go to search public records. There's like a new way and an old way. I go to the original 2020 site, and then you type in the PIN number for the property. Which you can find either at the assessor's website or on an old listing on the MLS. You can find it in Remind. There's a ton of ways you can find that information. This is going to be. So I'm just picking a listing, a past listing of mine. 49, 1037. All right, so we're going to search this listing, and now we're going to see, whoops, that was not what I wanted to do. So I searched this PIN number up here, and it's given me every recording that they have on file here for this PIN number. So we are going to just pick the most recent one here, and it pulls up some additional information. So property type is condo. Here's the PIN number. The unit number is 14C, but you can see here parking, there's another PIN associated with this property PIN, and it's the parking space, P67. So now in the document, the contract, I know that the legal parking space is P67 for conveyance. So that's really awesome. I can also click over here on view images. And these are like, I mean, you have to really look closely and get in real close to see these deeds. But if you look, you read down through this deed, you're gonna find some other cool information. You've got the PIN number here. You've got, here we go, unit number 14C and parking unit P67. This one might have a storage unit number also. But if your clients are unsure of the whether it's a deeded parking space or what the parking space number is, or if there's a storage space assigned or deeded, I'm sorry, it's going to be here on this deed, and you can go and search the actual deed to see if you can find it. Scroll down here. This one does not, I guess, have a storage unit. I thought it did, but it's all written in here. You just have to kind of scan this closely. It'll also tell you like original mortgager, like who's on the deed. So that can be helpful in your in prepping your listing agreement as well. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So say there is a senior freeze, how would you find that difference? So if the buyer, you know, isn't 65 years old and would only have a homeowner's exemption, how would you find what that difference would be in the taxes?
So I'm going to tell you to defer to your favorite real estate attorney because you don't want to be liable for quoting a number that's incorrect. So I'm going to go to my favorite real estate attorney and say, hey, I've got this listing coming up. There's a senior freeze. Can you go in and calculate, you know, here's what I think it's going to sell for. Can you go in and give us a, you know, a calculation on what you think the new tax rate's going to be? There's certainly a way you can figure out how to do it. I don't have that kind of time. Numbers are not my strong suit. So I'm just going to defer that to my attorney. They're more than happy to help determine that information for you. And then you don't have the liability for it either.
And then one other question on the storage space. I've seen
Yeah.
ones that aren't like numbered or listed. And if it's not on the deed, I mean, how would we find that information?
Yeah, typically your property management company or the homeowners association has that information on file. They'll have it on file somewhere. They might have to look for it, but typically they will have it. 9.5 times out of 10, the storage unit is not deeded, so it's not on the deed, but every now and again you will see one. They're typically a limited common element or just an assigned space. They're probably more often an assigned space. And the property manager will have that information. So you may have to do some digging. You don't need it to get the listing contract signed, but you are going to want to go get it before you put it on the MLS so you have, you know, more complete information, because someone's going to want to see it. Someone's going to want to write an offer, and you don't want to have to wait on them writing an offer until you go and find out what the storage space number is.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We got a couple minutes here, so I'm going to pop in DocuSign so you can kind of see what that looks like. Oh, there might be chat. Let's see. We held money in escrow to ensure freeze was submitted by the seller. Jim. Oh, so there was a senior freeze on a property and you guys held money in escrow until it was settled. Is that what you're saying? Hopefully he'll text in or message in and let me know. He also asked, I know it's the 7.1 being requested in the MLS. Yeah, the 7.1 is your oh, the 7.1 or the 7.0? Yeah, the attorney will take care of those senior fees and other exemptions. If you have a great buyer attorney, buyer attorney, your buyer's attorney will file the homeowner's exemption for your new buyers as well. So when you're interviewing attorneys, real estate attorneys, ensure that they make it their common practice automatically. It's like a checklist item for them to apply for the homestead exemption on behalf of their buyer clients. Mine always does. I never have to worry about it, and my clients don't either. Because when you get to a listing and you're like, this is your primary residence, you've been paying full taxes for 10 years, they're not gonna be so happy about that. The 7.0 is actually the buyer contract. And while it wasn't a topic today, and we actually are not gonna get to it, you will want to, in the city of Chicago, you will want to ask the listing agent which contract they prefer, because you don't want the contract to be a reason that a seller or their listing agent doesn't choose your buyer's contract. You want to give them, I prefer the 7.0, but it's 12 pages instead of 4. So I totally get why people prefer the short form. you're just going to want to ask what the listing agent prefers. And it's going to be whatever they have the most experience with, typically, and either one is fine. If you're outside of the city of Chicago, you're going to want to use either the multi-board, the 7.0, because that one is applicable for all of our different MLS boards, NASBAR, More, which is Main Street. I don't know, what are there's some other ones out there as well. Or you're going to use the contract that's associated with sort of that area. So NASBAR is North Shore, Barrington. If you are primarily doing business up there and a member of that MLS, you're going to use their listing contract or their buyer contract. I don't know if they have I don't know NASBAR well enough to know if they have their own purchase contract, but it's always good to just ask the listing agent what they prefer and do that. If they ask for a 7.0, learn the 7.0. And I think I'm teaching the buyer agreement in a week or two, so we'll cover the buyer's agreement then. If you have any questions about the listing agreement, feel free to reach out to me at any time. My phone number is 312-931-5858. Best way to reach me is text message. Or you can email me at Kara Chicago, K-A-R-A, Chicago @kw.com. I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions from our session today. That's a whole lot of information to get through in an hour and a half. So
Hey,
I appreciate
Kara,
your time. Hey, JP.
where are you at? Are you at the Lakeview office or the Lincoln Park office right now?
I'm at Lakeview.
Okay. I might
Are
come
you?
find you.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Any other questions that you have on the deed here or on the listing, this particular listing contract? So all of the listing contracts are going to be somewhat similar in that there's, like 5 criteria that we're looking for. And that's who's the brokerage, who's the seller, who's the designated agent, is there dual agency or not, and what's the term of the contract, how long is it going, got to have a definite end, and what's the compensation. Those are, I guess that's 6 things. So those are the 6 things that are the most important things on that contract, and the more completely you can complete it, the better off you are from a liability standpoint. Any other questions? Val, do you have any input?
No, I feel that, like, if you are going to use a transaction coordinator, providing us with as much information as you have, and us get in touch with the seller is perfect. I really appreciate you taking the time, Kara, and I'm glad that I jumped on this because I did learn some new things, and it's a good thing. And going to the Cook County Recorder of Deeds is something that I haven't been doing, but I will be doing from now on, besides going to the Cook County Assessor and that.
It often saves a ton of time because your sellers have no idea what those numbers are either. And they might differ from what the property management company has assigned, like to the parking spaces. So making sure you get the right information, I think is critical, and it can just save you a ton of time rather than waiting around for either the property manager to call you back or the seller to figure it out. Just go look for it yourself.
Yeah.
Good
information.
All right, and then go to Cook County Assessor's website to get PIN number, tax information, exemption information. All right, guys. Again, shoot me an email, send me a text if you have additional questions. If you're about to write up your first contract and need a little support, happy to help also. So, and I'm sure the leadership in your market centers are happy to help too, but know that I'm here and glad to give you some pointers.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon. You should take this class like 5 more times, by the way. You'll learn something new each time. Bye.
Great. Yep. Thank you.